Okay, DN308. The question is, I want to land my aircraft in enemy territory to deliver cargo on an abandoned airfield and then take off again. How do I do that and set up mission objectives? Okay, so I built this logic here and I want to go step by step through it to sort of explain to you what I've done and how you can do it in the future. So first off, I've created a player Ju52, set him as player, and started him in the air, but you can start him on the ground, it doesn't matter. And then I set up their payload with cargo inside of it, right? That's very important. You got to actually have that. So up here on the top, I have some fails. So my first fail is if they crash the plane. So I have an event for that. And if you go right click your object, so we go to select, we say crash plane, see on plane crash. So that's firing to this trigger, I'm sorry, this timer. And then we have a mission objective. And we just set it as a primary task, failure. Of course, we're playing as axis because Ju52. And we set it as failed. We send a little message that says, hey, you crashed your plane. And then 15 seconds later, we end the mission. And it will end in failure, and it'll tell you you crashed a plane. This is the failure message that they'll get. So I have another one, the same idea. We have an event. That event is on killed. So just in case the player gets killed, we have the same message. That message will say you were killed. And we'll tell the player, yo, you were shot down and you didn't deliver the cargo. And 15 seconds later, the mission will end. There's just our standard failure messages. Then I have this unique failure message here. So we have a timer for 1 millisecond. And this unique message is going to be an event on bingo cargo. So on bingo cargo. And what happens here is just in case the player releases the cargo before they land at the enemy airfield or the abandoned airfield, if they release that cargo first, then we're going to fail it. Or say you didn't land first. So this is going to be a failed on you didn't land first. We still have our failure. It's a primary task. And we tell the player, you know what, you must land first before dropping off the cargo. Mission is failed. And then 15 seconds later, we end the mission. So if the player does come into this complex trigger, that's what we have right here, right? And they land. So complex triggers are just a bunch of events that could happen inside this yellow circle. So we have a couple of events, and I will go into the properties of this guy. So the first one we have is on object stationary and alive. This is basically the plane has stopped and it's still alive. So this is what we're going to use for our landing. This is the event for that. Then we have another one for object took off. So this is basically the plane is taken off. We're going to talk about that one last. And then object deliver cargo. So when the player presses the bomb button, they'll get this message. Okay, and then of course I have the Ju52 selected, so you can go in here and we can find our Ju52 and add it. I also have check plane, so it's looking for that particular Ju52. And then country code is going to be Germany, and if we want to be even more unique, we can say the exact name of the object. In this case, would be player Ju52. Of course, I don't have that because I only have one Ju52, but if you have a bunch of Ju52s, you want to make sure the player is doing it, then you need to add that object name there and name it whatever you've named the player's Ju52. Okay, so hit OK on here. And so our first event is our on stationary and landed and alive. So they as soon as they are stationary and alive, then we immediately deactivate this guy. So this means that if they drop off the bombs or the cargo, then this will never fire because this timer is disabled, right? At the same time, we will activate this timer, which, by the way, gets deactivated as soon as the mission begins. So as soon as the mission begins, these timers get deactivated right here. So none of these events, so if these events somehow magically fire off, they won't because the player didn't land first. The player has to stop and land first. As soon as they stop and land, then we'll activate both this one and this one. So this one is stationary and alive. 1 second later, then we deactivate this timer again. And the reason we're deactivating the timer is because just in case the player like stops and then starts to move again, and then stops and starts to move again, this will continually fire because it's stationary and alive, right? We don't want that to happen. So as soon as they stop and they're alive, we're going to fire this event and never fire it again. And this event will say, hey, you know what? You landed. You can drop off the cargo now. And we'll give them a successful secondary task. We'll do the first one here. And that secondary task will say to the player, it'll say landed at airfield. All right. So then the player presses the bomb button. When they do that and they're inside this circle, which they should be because they just landed, 1 second later, we will deactivate that again. So meaning that all the things behind this will never fire off. And we'll let the player know you dropped the cargo off. Good job. We'll give them another secondary task. That secondary task will tell them you dropped the cargo off. We'll wait 15 seconds and then we'll say you're clear for taking off now. And we'll activate our last chain of events here. And when we look at our cargo drop-off, we have our took-off one, and that's where this purple line is coming in. So 1 second later, it fires, and it'll never fire again. So if they land and take off, or land and take off, it doesn't matter. We're only doing this once. And then we'll say, you've taken off, good job. We'll give them another secondary task that says, hey, you took off from the enemy field or the abandoned field or whatever you want to say. Then we have a long chain here that goes to this guy to deactivate. And basically, we're deactivating this complex trigger, meaning that this complex trigger will never be used anymore. We don't want to use it anymore. And this will also save in resources because complex triggers are very expensive. All right, then 1 second later, we activate another complex trigger. So this complex trigger would be at your return base. And it's the same idea. We have another event. The event is finish the stationary alive. So basically we're saying the players landed and they stopped. We're checking for planes, that same Ju52. Our country code is still Germany. If we really wanted to be unique, we could say the name of the player. And also you notice that I do not have it enabled because I'm enabling it after this event fires off, after these series of events fires off. Right? So then they're stationary and alive, they land, and they stop. We send a message to this guy, and then it fires off this series of chains. So again, we're immediately deactivating it, only letting it fire one time. We let the player know, hey, you've landed, good job. We give them our primary task now, and we say success, and that primary task will tell them RTB and landed. 15 seconds later, and we end the mission. And when we end the mission, on the end mission screen, the player will see succeeded. They'll see these three secondary tasks and this primary task completed. And they won. It's mission over. They did a good job. So I'm going to give this group to you. We'll also take a picture of it. And if you have any questions, by all means, hit me up. Thanks for watching.